The illegal migrant charged with murdering Maryland mother of 5, Rachel Morin, will be extradited to Rachel's home state of Maryland. And this morning, Rachel's mother is responding to DHS Secretary Mayorkas and the Biden administration, who she says haven't even reached out to her family yet.
First and foremost, of course, our hearts break for the children, the family, the loved ones, the friends of the individual who was murdered, the woman, the mother.
These are American citizens. These are the people that help to strengthen our country. These are the men and women that keep our country going. Like, to categorize her as a statistic, it just shows how impersonal that they are.
Matt Whitaker is a former acting attorney general and Trump campaign surrogate, and he joins us now. Matt, good morning to you. So Patty Morin was reacting to Alejandra Mayorkas, referring to her daughter as the individual who was murdered, which she and any parent would feel reduces their child to a statistic. So if the goal of the Biden administration is to take a compassionate approach when it comes to illegal immigration, how do you explain the lack of compassion here?
Well, good morning to you and Todd, Carly. You know, the compassion only goes so far as, I guess, the illegal immigrants, because, you know, what they have done here to Rachel Morin is they have, completely dehumanized her. They have, dramatically made her just a statistic and, collateral damage from really radical policies of where they opened the southern border, allowed millions of people to come into our country. And now we're suffering the consequences of that. And Alexander Mayorkas, President Biden, none of them seem willing to confront the real issues and the consequences of their policies. Instead, they just seem to be willing to ignore the death and destruction, whether it's these murders that we talk about all too often, or whether it's the other crimes. It is just, it's staggering. It's heartless.
Matt, can the Morin family sue the federal government over the death of their daughter?
In this case, it would be complicated, but it doesn't mean they shouldn't. And I think the federal government is responsible for her death. I want to be very clear about that this was a senseless, unnecessary crime, a victim that should not have been victimized, and a family that now has to live with the consequences. And I think the federal government is responsible for that, and particularly Joe Biden and Alexander Mayorkas and their radical policies.
Yeah, that soundbite from Alejandra Mayorkas is shocking, because this administration can name every single trans influencer on TikTok, but they can't remember the name of that murdered woman. It is sickening. Meantime, I want to get your thoughts on this. We are awaiting a Supreme Court decision on former President Trump's claim of immunity in his federal classified documents case, and former AG Eric Holder is worried. Watch.
Wait a minute. A president can violate the American criminal law if he or she is doing something in their official capacity. That is an absurd and dangerous conclusion. And I'm worried, given the length of time that it has taken for the Supreme Court to decide this case, that something along those lines might come out of the Supreme Court.
From one AG to another, do you agree with Eric Holder, Matt?
Well, that sounds like a lot of liberal hand-wringing. Remember, they have placed a lot of their faith in beating Donald Trump in their lawfare strategy, whether it's the cases from Jack Smith, whether it's Fani Willis in Fulton County, or whether it was the case up in New York City. You've seen, since President Trump hasn't been in court, how he's been traveling and communicating, whether it's, when he's going to Pittsburgh soon, he was in Wisconsin recently, the huge crowds. You see why they want to keep him in a courtroom, why they want to keep him off the campaign trail. But, the Supreme Court is going to say what the law is. Obviously, there is presidential immunity for official acts. Our system would not function without that, and the Supreme Court is going to say where the parameters of that. In fact, Eric Holder knows his history. He knows the Nixon case already established some of that precedent, at least in civil cases, and a lot of us expect that they'll extend that to criminal cases.
So how should ultimately, you said what you think they will do, how should this court rule? Put yourself on it for a moment, Matt. How should they rule?
Well, remember, I'm not an elite Harvard grad or Yale grad, so I'm a state school, Iowa law school, so I'm not sure I'm qualified, at least under the modern definition, but I'll take a stab at it, Todd. I think what they should do is they should say that presidents do have immunity, that our founding fathers intended them to not make decisions with fear that they would be prosecuted by the next administration. So I think they should say that the outer bounds of presidential immunity are all the official acts that can be contemplated in a president's job under the Constitution. And you heard that in the oral arguments, Todd. You remember when there was a lot of back and forth, but it was pretty clear that many of the justices were coming out that there was presidential immunity for official acts, and they were just trying to find kind of where that extreme edge is. But, it is also, to me, not these crazy hypotheticals about, sort of ordering, your political opponents assassinated. It is the practical of doing the job of president and making decisions to protect the American people. One thing that Joe Biden, based on the last story we just talked about, doesn't seem to want to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, today is a decision day at the Supreme Court. So is tomorrow. So we're going to be watching if they come to a conclusion. Matt, thank you so much for waking up, joining us. We appreciate it.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.